Had the country on track to political reconciliation. Security was in a good place. And when we withdrew, it all went to hell, as I predicted in 2011. So if we retake Ramadi and we retake Mosul and we don't leave American forces behind to help keep this country together, it will all happen again. And you'll never fix Iraq without dealing with Syria, and we have absolutely no strategy in Syria.
But the prime minister at that time, Nouri al-Maliki, he turned out to be a disaster too, right?
Yeah, he was, but the problem was that the American government, the White House, was offering less than 3,000 troops as a follow-on force, not enough to make a difference. But when we pulled out, he went back to his sectarian ways. Iraq split apart, the security environment deteriorated, and everything we fought for, everything that was sacrificed for on behalf of the American taxpayer and the American soldier was just squandered by President Obama. President Bush made plenty of mistakes. He is smart enough to adjust in 2006. But President Obama's decision to withdraw all forces in the face of sound military advice has come back to haunt us in Iraq and Syria. And if he doesn't adjust his policy, this problem's going to get worse over there and eventually come here.
And so you don't accept the notion that Nouri al-Maliki was the prime minister of Iraq at the time, rejected U.S. requests that any U.S. troops who remain there would have immunity from Iraqi prosecution. Once he rejected that, the U.S. got out.
That was a complete, absolute lie. I was on the ground talking to Maliki and every political leader in Iraq. They were willing to have a follow-on force, but the administration got the answer they wanted. The president wanted to keep a political promise to get us out of Iraq, and he did, and it made it impossible for us to stay. When he says otherwise, he is rewriting history. This has come back to haunt him, has come back to haunt our country. It's destroying Iraq. Syria is hell on earth because of his decision to withdraw all forces. He got the answer he wanted, Wolf. He's not going to be able to rewrite history.
Senator Graham, your response when it comes to Syrian refugees?
Yeah, number one, how does President Obama sleep at night? Look what you've let happen on your watch. Your commanders told you don't withdraw from Iraq because we'll lose all of our gains. 3 years ago, your entire national security team, Senator McCain and I begged you to do a no-fly zone and help the Free Syrian Army while it would matter, but you said no. I'm not blaming Bobby, I'm not blaming Rick, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm blaming Barack Obama for this mess.
Thank you, Senator.
Fred Kaplan is here. He's the national security columnist for Slate Magazine and Edward R. Murrow Fellow with the Council on Foreign Relations. Fred, nice to see you. All right, so you write that the fall of Mosul has little to do with the withdrawal of American troops and everything to do with Nouri al-Maliki. Explain that.
I think we need to dispel a myth, this business about Obama pulled the troops out of Iraq and that's why it's falling apart. President Bush signed a treaty at the end of 2008, the Status of Forces Agreement, which said that all U.S. forces, not just combat forces, all U.S. forces will be out of Iraq by the end of 2011. There was one clause which said this can be amended with the approval of the Iraqi parliament. And the Iraqi parliament was not going to approve this. So, you know, John McCain and other people can talk all they want about how Obama blew it, he should have negotiated a deal. It was not going to happen. The problem, the reason why this is going on now is that as we were pulling out, Maliki had promised that he would run a more inclusive government, that he would bring in more Sunnis. He's a Shiite leader. He would bring more Sons of Iraq militias into the National Army. He would strike an agreement on oil revenue, sharing the revenue.
And the Sunnis believed that.
Yeah, the Sunnis laid down their arms and came into the government, quite a lot of them. And he betrayed the whole thing. Not only that, he went off and arrested, or tried to arrest, chased into Kurdistan, the top Sunni political leader. He's running a very exclusionary government.
But was there anything the U.S. could have done to prevent him from behaving the way he did?
We couldn't prevent it when we had 100,000 troops there. Or actually, we could put him on a leash when we had 100,000 troops there. And if we had 5,000 troops there still, which we wouldn't because they didn't want us to be there, we could also put a little bit of a leash on him.
So the president is saying now that we need concessions on both sides. I mean, is that even a possibility that the Shiites and the Sunnis will each give a little something?
Well, it depends on both sides. If you're talking about ISIS, I mean, that's not going to happen. As you've mentioned, Al-Qaeda kicked them out because they were too nutty. So, you know, this is not in, they're not into joining politics. There still are some Sunni leaders who I think are open to conciliation, but I don't know if anything is possible with Maliki still as prime minister, quite honestly.
So Obama has a tough choice here. I mean, should the U.S. not intervene? What do you think? Well,
if we intervene, you have to keep in mind how this will be looked at on the ground. It won't be that we're protecting Iraq. It'll be we're protecting Maliki. And we don't want to be in that position. I think one thing very interesting to watch for is what the Turks do. ISIS, when they were on their rampage in Mosul, sacked the Turkish embassy and is holding several Turks hostage. This is an attack on Turkey. So I would hope that Obama's on the phone with the leaders of Turkey, and you know, don't exclude the possibility of bringing Iran into this. This is one of these situations where the United States, Turkey, and Iran have the same interests.
Yeah. Certainly an interesting problem for all of them. Fred Kaplan, nice to see you. Thank you.
Republicans have criticized President Obama for not leaving troops in Iraq. Some have said if American forces had stayed, there would be no ISIS. But Emma Skye believes that was never in the cards. Iraq's Prime Minister Maliki had a new set of patrons, his fellow Shiites in Tehran. And the mullahs made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
That was part of Iran's deal with Maliki. We will give you a third term, but the conditions are no American soldiers. That was what Tehran had demanded. There was no way it would have gone through the parliament.
One thing is clear. It was only Iraq's army that could have stopped ISIS. Instead, Iraqi soldiers threw down their weapons and ran.
People look at the rise of ISIS. Many people point to the invasion of Iraq as the principal cause. What do you say to that?
I think there are elements of truth in that, but I think we've again got to be extremely careful, otherwise we'll misunderstand what's going on in Iraq and in Syria today. Of course, you can't say that those of us who removed Saddam in 2003 bear no responsibility for the situation in 2015, but it's important also to realize, one, that the Arab Spring, which began in 2011, would also have had its impact on Iraq today, and two, ISIS actually came to prominence from a base in Syria and not in Iraq. And that leads me to the broader point, which I think is so essential when we're looking at policy today, which is we have tried intervention and putting down troops in Iraq. We've tried intervention without putting in troops in Libya. And we've tried no intervention at all but demanding regime change in Syria. Right? It's not clear to me that even if our policy did not work, subsequent policies have worked better.
You went from being really the most successful British politician of your generation, perhaps of a lot larger time period than that, to being called a war criminal. How has that made you feel?
Look, I think one of the responsibilities you get when you get a big position of power is, in the end, in these big decisions, you've got to do what you think is right. Now, whether it's right or not, that's for everyone can have their judgment about that. But when I think of my crime, if you like, which is removing Saddam Hussein, and then I think of what frankly has happened in the world as we've watched Syria unfold in these last years, with hundreds of thousands of people dying, often innocent civilians barrel bombed, starved, subject to the most horrific weapons, including chemical weapons. And we have stood back, and we in the West, and again we bear responsibility for this in Europe most of all, we've done nothing. I don't know. I think that's a judgment of history I'm prepared to have. But we'll see. Look, this was the most difficult decision I ever took in politics. And I was aware at the time I was taking it that it was going to be politically extremely difficult. I do point out, by the way, because I always do this to people, I did actually win an election after Iraq. But I agree, it's been a huge political problem. But I am the least significant aspect of this. It's what's happening today that should really concern us.
Tony Blair, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Fareed.